I used to think my son didn't care about me. Not out of hate, not even indifference, just that quiet distance that forms between two people who stop trying to understand each other. It started so small, I barely noticed. A closed bedroom door, short answers at the dinner table. The way he'd keep his eyes on his plate when I tried to talk about his day. My wife, Ellen, used to say, "He's just growing up, Mark. Boys change." But I knew better. This wasn't growing up, it was growing apart. Our house had grown quieter since Ellen passed. That woman had laughter in her bones, the kind of laugh that turned even bad news into something bearable. When she got sick, she still smiled through it. When she was gone, it was like someone turned off the lights inside our home. That was 3 years ago. Since then, it's just been me and my boy Ryan. He was 16 when we lost her. Awkward, quiet, always buried in books or his phone. I didn't know how to reach him, and truth be told, I was too broken to try hard enough. I threw myself into work, construction jobs, side repairs, anything that kept my hands busy. He spent most of his time in his room. We coexisted under the same roof, two people haunted by the same loss, but grieving on different islands. Some nights I'd sit at the kitchen table, dinner untouched, listening to the faint sound of music from his room. It wasn't loud or angry, just mellow, soft, almost melancholy. I wanted to knock, to talk, to say something, anything. But every time I tried, the words froze. Because how do you tell your son you don't know how to be both father and mother at once? How do you admit you're scared, that you're failing him too? So instead, I did what men like me always do. I stayed quiet and hoped time would fix what words couldn't. Then came the day that changed everything. It was early spring, one of those cold mornings when the air smells like wet earth and the promise of something new. I was cleaning the house, something I rarely did beyond the basics. The place had started feeling like a museum of memories, dust gathering on framed photos, her perfume still faint on the dresser. Ryan was away at a weekend school trip for a debate competition. He didn't tell me much about it, just left a note on the counter. Back Sunday night. Don't forget to feed Rusty. Rusty was our dog, Ellen's old golden retriever, now more gray than gold. He followed me around like he knew I needed company. I was in Ryan's room, trying to tidy up a bit, just picking up clothes, changing the sheets. I didn't mean to snoop. But something about that quiet room made me pause. The walls were bare except for one old baseball poster, faded from sunlight. The desk was neat, too neat for a teenager. Only a lamp, a few books stacked neatly, and a wooden drawer at the corner that seemed just slightly out of place. Not locked, but closed carefully, like someone guarding something private. I almost left it alone. Almost. But curiosity, and maybe guilt, got the better of me. I pulled the drawer open slowly. Inside were folded papers, a few sketches, and a small brown notebook tied with a string. Nothing special at first glance. I hesitated, then untied it. The first page read, "Things I wish I could tell Dad, but can't." My heart stopped. I froze, holding that notebook like it was made of glass. For a long moment I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Then, with shaking hands, I turned the page. Sometimes I think Dad blames me for Mom dying. Maybe he doesn't, but he looks at me like he wants to say something and never does. I wish he'd yell at me, anything, just so I'd know what he feels. He still sets the table for her sometimes. Last night he burned the casserole because he forgot to set the timer. He threw it away before I came out, but I could smell it. I think he cried in the garage again. I want to tell him I miss her too. I want to tell him I see how hard he's trying, even when he doesn't talk. But every time I open my mouth, I feel stupid. I don't know how to say it right. I felt something twist deep inside me. Shame, guilt, love, all tangled together. All this time, I thought he didn't care. But my boy, he'd been watching me, hurting with me, in silence. The next page was covered in rough sketches, small penciled drawings of our family. Ryan was good, really good. There was one of Ellen, sitting on the porch steps, laughing with her hair tied up the way she used to. Another of me, fixing a leaky pipe under the sink, Rusty sitting beside me. And one more, of all three of us, before everything changed. Below it, in tiny handwriting, he'd written, "I draw us how I remember." Before the sadness took over, I couldn't hold it together anymore. I sat on his bed, notebook in my lap, tears rolling down my face before I could stop them. I hadn't cried since the funeral, not once. But in that moment, I realized how much love had been living quietly right beside me, and I'd been too blind to see it. There were more entries, little notes, thoughts, things he couldn't say aloud. I joined debate because Mom said I had her voice. I hope she's proud. Dad works too hard. He doesn't even buy new shoes, just fixes the old ones. I'm saving my allowance to buy him a new pair for his birthday. He won't accept it, but I'll try. Sometimes I dream Mom tells me to take care of him. I think she knows he's lonelier than he admits. Each page was like being handed a piece of my son's heart, one I didn't even know I'd been missing. When I finally closed the notebook, I sat in silence, holding it against my chest. The house was so still I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the distant ticking of the wall clock, the faint sound of Rusty snoring in the hallway. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone in this house. My son had been right here, trying to love me in his own quiet way, and I'd mistaken silence for distance. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how many times I'd told myself, he doesn't care. But caring doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it hides in sketches, or small notes in a drawer, or a boy's awkward silence at dinner. When Ryan came home the next evening, I didn't mention what I'd found. Not yet. I made dinner. Real dinner, not something frozen or half-burned. I set the table for two, and when he walked in, surprised, I smiled. Thought we could eat together tonight, I said. He hesitated, then nodded. We ate quietly for a while, the clinking of forks filling the space where grief used to live. Then, for the first time in a long time, he looked up and said, Dad, this is really good. And I swear, that small moment meant more to me than any award, any paycheck, any success I'd ever had. Because it was the start of something I thought I'd lost forever, a bridge between us. That night, after he went to bed, I went back to his room, just for a moment. I didn't open the drawer again. I didn't need to. Instead, I whispered quietly, Thank you, son. And somewhere deep down, I hoped Ellen was watching. Because our boy, the one I thought I'd lost to silence, had found a way to reach me after all. The morning after that dinner, I woke up with a strange feeling I hadn't felt in years. Hope. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, like the first hint of light before sunrise. I made coffee, fed Rusty, and looked out the kitchen window at the backyard where Ryan used to play baseball with Ellen. I could almost see him out there again. 10 years old, yelling, Mom, watch this, as she clapped and laughed from the porch steps. It hurt to remember, but this time it didn't hollow me out. This time, it made me grateful we'd had those moments at all. Ryan came downstairs late that morning, still sleepy, wearing that same faded hoodie he always wore. He grabbed cereal, nodded good morning, and went to sit at the counter. Same old routine. Except this time, I didn't just watch. How was the trip? I asked. He shrugged. Good. We won 2 rounds? That's great, bud. I said, smiling. I'm proud of you. He looked surprised, almost like he didn't expect me to say that. He gave a small, awkward smile, the kind that lasts half a second, but feels like forever when you've been waiting for it. Over the next few weeks, I started trying. Not the way I used to, forcing conversation or pretending everything was fine, but in small ways. Asking about his day, leaving snacks for him when he studied late, watching his debate videos online, even if I didn't understand half the terms he used. I learned that he was good, really good. His coach even called one evening to tell me Ryan had a natural way of speaking, calm but firm, just like Ellen. That one hit me deep. I wanted to tell him I'd seen the notebook, that I knew how much he cared. But something in me said not yet. Maybe it wasn't about confessing what I found. Maybe it was about showing him that I'd changed. His 17th birthday was coming up in 2 weeks. Normally, we didn't do much. Maybe a takeout pizza, a gift card, something simple. But this time I wanted to make it count. Then I remembered one of the notes I'd read in his journal. Dad works too hard. He doesn't even buy new shoes, just fixes the old ones. I'm saving my allowance to buy him a new pair for his birthday. He won't accept it, but I'll try. I looked down at my boots. Worn, scuffed, the soles patched twice already. The thought of him saving up to buy me shoes had broken me back then. So this time, I decided I'd do something that spoke his language. Quiet love, thoughtfulness, no big gestures. A week before his birthday, I started planning. I asked his friend Kyle, the one he hung out with at debate practice, what kind of shoes Ryan liked. Kyle grinned. He keeps talking about those white sneakers, the ones all the guys are getting. Says he'll get them when he can. So I drove to the mall, feeling completely out of place among all the neon lights and loud music. I found the pair. Sleek, simple, and way too expensive for what they were, but I bought them anyway. Then I did something that surprised even me. I wrote a note. Happy birthday, son. I know we don't always say much, but I'm listening now. Love, Dad. I tucked the note inside the shoebox and wrapped it up. When his birthday came, I made his favorite breakfast, pancakes with chocolate chips, the way Ellen used to make them. He looked at the plate, then at me. You remembered? Of course, I said. Can't forget something your mom used to make every year. He smiled, a real smile this time. Then I handed him the box. It's not much, I said, but I thought you might like it. He opened it slowly, peeled back the paper, and froze when he saw what was inside. His eyes went wide, not like a kid's excitement, but something softer, deeper. Dad, these are. I know, I said quietly. You've been wanting them. He looked at me, his mouth opening like he wanted to say something, but no words came. Then he did something he hadn't done since he was a little boy. He hugged me. No hesitation, no awkward pat on the back. Just a real, solid hug. Thanks, Dad, he said into my shoulder. Really. That night, I went to bed with a heart so full it hurt. I thought about Ellen, how proud she'd be. I thought about Ryan, how far we'd come from those days of silence and misunderstanding. But the part that stayed with me most was what I saw later that night. When I went to turn off the kitchen light, I passed by his room. The door was slightly open, and I saw him sitting at his desk. He wasn't on his phone. He was writing, in that same brown notebook. For a moment I froze in the doorway, just watching him. He didn't see me. He wrote something down, then smiled faintly to himself. I didn't need to know what he was writing, because I already knew. It's funny how love hides in small things. A pair of shoes, a note, a quiet breakfast where no one says the word, sorry, but both people mean it. That's the thing about healing. It doesn't happen all at once. It comes in soft moments, the kind you barely notice until they stack up and turn into something solid again. And that night, as I turned off the light, I realized I wasn't just getting my son back. We were both finding our way home again. It was a Thursday morning, the kind that starts out so ordinary you'd never expect it to change your life. The sun was soft through the blinds, coffee was brewing, and the house smelled like toast. Ryan had already left for school, and I was sorting through the mail, bills, coupons, and a few college brochures that had started showing up lately. I wasn't prepared for the one envelope that caught my eye. It was addressed to Mr. Daniel Carter, my name, but the handwriting wasn't the usual printed label. It was in ink, messy, familiar. My stomach tightened. It was Ryan's handwriting. At first, I thought it was an assignment or a form he wanted me to sign. But when I opened it, I realized it wasn't meant for me at all. Inside was a folded sheet of lined paper. At the top it said, Dear Mom. I froze. My hand shook as I unfolded the rest of the letter. It wasn't long, maybe a page and a half. But by the time I reached the end, my eyes were wet, and the room felt heavy with silence. He'd written it as part of a grief project for school, a letter to someone he'd lost. He never mailed it. Somehow, it ended up in the outgoing mail pile with everything else, maybe by accident. But every word in it tore through me like lightning. Dear Mom, it's been almost 5 years, and I still don't understand why you had to go. Dad doesn't talk about you much. Sometimes I think he blames himself. Sometimes I think I blame him too. But then I see the way he looks at your pictures. Like he's still trying to say sorry. He works all the time, says it's to keep busy. But I think he's just trying not to feel. I wish he'd talk to me. I wish I knew how to talk to him. I tell my friends I'm fine, but I'm not. I miss you every single day. I wonder if you can see us. If you're proud of us, I'm trying, Mom. I really am. Love, Ryan. By the time I finished reading, my coffee had gone cold. The letter trembled in my hand, and I had to sit down. For years I'd thought my silence was protecting him, sparing him from reliving the pain. But all that time, he'd been carrying it alone. I looked around the kitchen, at the photos on the wall, the empty chair where Ellen used to sit, the quiet that had become our normal. And I realized how much that quiet had cost us. That night, when Ryan came home, I wanted to tell him I'd read the letter. I wanted to say I was sorry, that I should have done better, but when he walked in, sweaty from practice and humming under his breath, I couldn't bring myself to ruin that small piece of peace. Instead, I made dinner, his favorite again, grilled chicken and mashed potatoes, and waited for the right moment. He sat down, tired but smiling. "You didn't have to cook, Dad. I could have grabbed something." "I wanted to," I said simply. For a while, we just ate in silence. Then I said it. "You ever think about your mom?" He looked up, caught off guard. "Sometimes," he said cautiously. "I do too," I told him. "Every day, actually." He blinked. "You do?" "Yeah." I just didn't know how to talk about it without breaking apart. He set his fork down slowly. The air between us thickened, heavy but tender. "I thought you were mad at her," he said quietly, "for getting sick, for leaving." My heart cracked open. "No, son, never. I was mad at the world, at myself, but never at her." He nodded slowly, his jaw tight. Then, for the first time in years, we talked about her laugh, her terrible singing voice, the way she used to burn the pancakes, but still make us eat them. By the end of it, we were both laughing, real, tearful, healing laughter. After he went to bed, I took the letter back out of the drawer. I read it one more time, then folded it neatly and placed it in an old photo album next to a picture of Ellen holding him as a baby. I whispered, "He's doing okay, honey. We both are." And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe she heard me. The days that followed were lighter. Ryan started spending more time downstairs. Sometimes he'd even sit on the porch with me in the evenings, both of us quietly watching the sun dip behind the trees. It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. We were learning to be comfortable again in each other's presence. But I could tell there was still something he was holding back. Something deeper that he wasn't ready to say. I saw it in the way he sometimes lingered near his mother's photo or closed his notebook quickly when I walked into the room. I didn't push. I knew in time, the truth always finds its way out. One evening as I was closing up the workshop, my phone buzzed. It was Ryan's teacher, Mrs. Clark, his English teacher. She sounded kind but worried. "Mr. Carter," she said, "I wanted to let you know that Ryan's essay for the senior showcase has been selected as one of the top 3. It's a personal narrative, very moving." "That's great," I said, smiling. "What's it about?" She hesitated. "It's about you." The words hung in the air. "Me," I repeated, confused. "Yes, it's called The Man Who Stayed Silent." He said he wanted to dedicate it to his father. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I just stood there in my workshop, surrounded by the quiet hum of the evening, feeling every emotion I'd buried for years rush to the surface. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after Ryan had gone to bed. I thought about everything we'd been through. The anger, the silence, the letters and notes and small gestures. And I realized maybe this was his way of speaking now, through words, through writing, the same way Ellen used to. I smiled to myself and whispered, "He's got your gift, Ellen," but part of me was terrified too, because if he'd written about me, about us, I wondered what truths I was finally about to face. When Ryan's teacher told me his essay was about me, I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what he'd written. Was it anger, forgiveness, or something in between? A father always hopes his son sees the good in him, but I knew I hadn't given him much of that for years. Still, I promised myself I'd be there. Not to be seen, not to be thanked, just to listen. The senior showcase was held on a Friday evening in the high school auditorium. I hadn't been there since his freshman orientation, back when Ellen was still alive. I remember her squeezing my hand during the slideshow, whispering, "Can you believe he's in high school already?" Walking back into that same building felt like stepping into a memory I wasn't sure I was ready for. Parents filled the rows, chatting and taking pictures. I sat near the back, hands clasped, heart pounding. Onstage, students took turns reading essays about friendship, ambition, loss. Some were funny, others heartfelt. But when Ryan's name was called, everything around me went quiet. He walked to the microphone in his dark blue shirt and sneakers, the ones I'd bought him for his birthday. He looked older that night, not in years, but in something deeper. Composed, certain, he unfolded his paper, took a breath, and began. "The Man Who Stayed Silent. When my mother died, something inside our house changed. The walls felt colder, the lights dimmer. My father stopped talking, not to everyone, just to me. I thought silence meant anger. I thought he blamed me, or maybe her. But now I understand. Silence was his way of surviving. The air left my lungs. He worked every day, fixed everything that broke, paid every bill, but never said how he felt. I used to hate that about him. I thought love had to sound like words. But I've learned love also sounds like a hammer hitting a nail at midnight, so the roof doesn't leak. It sounds like footsteps outside your room after a nightmare, checking if you're okay. It sounds like a man who doesn't know how to say I love you, but shows it anyway. The room was silent. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks before I even noticed they'd started. He's not perfect. Neither am I. But maybe that's what love between a father and son is. Imperfect, quiet, but real. The kind that doesn't fade even when words do. He paused, then added softly, I used to call him the man who stayed silent. Now I call him the man who stayed. There was a heartbeat of stillness after he finished, and then the audience erupted in applause. People stood up. Some wiped their eyes, but I couldn't move. My hands trembled as I pressed them together, the sound of clapping fading behind the rush in my ears. He found me in the crowd, his eyes scanning, nervous, then locking onto mine. For a long second, we just looked at each other. And in that look, everything we hadn't said, every year, every tear, every silent dinner, finally found its voice. After the event, students and parents gathered in the hallway for photos and cake. Ryan was surrounded by his friends, laughing, but when he saw me, he broke away and came over. Hey, he said softly. Hey, I replied. You came. Of course I did, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I wouldn't miss it. Ooh, he rubbed the back of his neck, awkward. I didn't know if it was too much. Writing about us? It was perfect, I said, my voice cracking. Every word. He nodded, looking down. I meant what I said, Dad. You did stay. Even when it was hard. I took a deep breath, stepped closer. And I should have said something sooner, Ryan. I should have told you. I never stopped loving you. Not for a second. He looked up, and his eyes shone the same way Ellen's used to when she forgave me for something small. I know, he whispered. I know now. Then he hugged me again, not out of pity, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. And this time, I didn't just stand there. I hugged him back with everything I had. When we got home that night, I watched him head up the stairs, still holding his essay papers. At the landing, he turned around and said, Hey, Dad, yeah, I'm thinking about submitting it to the state competition. It's worth a scholarship. I smiled. You should? Your mother would be proud. He hesitated, then grinned. You think you could help me edit it? You're kind of good with words. I laughed, surprised. Me? Since when? Since you wrote that note for my birthday, he said. I kept it. He disappeared into his room before I could say anything else. And I stood there, halfway up the stairs, realizing I hadn't felt this kind of joy, this kind of peace, in years. That night I sat by the window with a cup of coffee, looking out at the yard where Ryan used to play. I could almost hear his laughter again, faint and far away. For so long I'd carried guilt like a second skin. But that night I let a little of it go, because my son didn't just forgive me. He understood me. And that's something I never thought I'd earn. It's strange how life can surprise you in the softest ways. After the showcase, something shifted in our house. Not dramatically, just quietly, like a curtain finally opening to let the light in. Ryan started spending more time around me again. We'd share breakfast on weekends, talk about his college plans, even watch baseball together on the old couch that had seen better days. He didn't roll his eyes anymore when I asked questions about his schoolwork. And sometimes, I'd catch him humming while he studied. The same tune Ellen used to hum when she was cooking. I'd forgotten what it felt like to have laughter echo in this house. I didn't realize how much I'd missed it until it came back. A few weeks later, a thick white envelope arrived in the mail. It had the state education logo on the corner. Bold blue letters, official and important. Ryan wasn't home yet. I held it for a long moment, smiling to myself. It had to be about his essay. When he walked in later that evening, his hair damp from the rain, I handed him the envelope. This came for you. He looked at it, then at me, his eyes wide. Do you think? Open it and find out. He tore it open right there by the kitchen counter, fingers trembling. He unfolded the letter, scanning it quickly, and then his mouth dropped open. "Dad," he breathed. I won. For a second, I just stared at him. Won. Yeah! Statewide! They want to publish my essay and invite me to the Capitol for the Youth Writing Symposium. His words tumbled out faster than he could breathe, excitement lighting up his face in a way I hadn't seen since he was a kid unwrapping presents at Christmas. I laughed, a sound that felt rusty, but good. "That's incredible, Ryan. You deserve it." He grinned so wide it hurt to look at him without tearing up. Then he did something unexpected. He reached into the envelope again and pulled out a smaller card. "They want parents to attend the ceremony," he said, reading. "You'll come, right?" There was no hesitation in his voice, no resentment, no awkwardness. Just a son asking his father to share something important with him. And for me, that meant more than any award. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," I said. In the days that followed, he practiced reading his essay aloud for the ceremony. He wanted to make sure it sounded natural, confident. He'd stand in the living room while I sat with a notebook, pretending to take judge notes. "Too fast on that line," I'd tease. "Slow down before the man who stayed. Let it land." He'd roll his eyes, but smile anyway. And every time he read it, I noticed how much more emotion he carried in his voice. Not sadness, not anger, just truth. One evening after rehearsal, he flopped onto the couch beside me. "Dad," he said quietly, "you think Mom would have been proud of me?" I swallowed hard. "She is proud of you, Ryan. She always has been." He nodded, eyes glistening but smiling. "I hope so." Then he leaned back and closed his eyes. "You know, I used to think you didn't miss her. You were so quiet all the time." "I missed her every day," I said softly. "I just didn't know how to carry it without breaking apart." He turned his head toward me. "You don't have to carry it alone anymore." That sentence, so simple, so pure, hit me like a wave. He didn't say it to comfort me. He said it because he meant it. Because somewhere along the way, my son had become the kind of man his mother would have admired. The ceremony was held 2 weeks later, in the state capitol, a grand old theater with red curtains and gold trim. When we walked in, I felt out of place among all the polished parents and young writers in crisp suits. But Ryan, he fit right in, confident, calm, mature. He went backstage to check in, and I found my seat near the front. As I waited, I glanced at the program. There it was, his name in bold, Ryan Carter, the man who stayed silent. Underneath, a short note dedicated to my father. I took a deep breath. When it was his turn to speak, he walked to the podium with that quiet strength I'd come to recognize. His voice filled the theater clear and sincere. But this time, he added something new, an ending that hadn't been in the version I heard before. I used to think silence was weakness. But now, I think silence is a language too. One I didn't learn to hear until I listened with my heart. The man who stayed silent taught me what love looks like when words run out. And tonight, I want to thank him for staying. The audience rose to their feet. Applause thundered through the hall, and I, the man who had spent years hiding from his own grief, found myself crying openly in front of strangers, too proud to care. Afterward, reporters and teachers congratulated him, shaking his hand, taking pictures. And every time someone said, "Your father must be so proud," he'd look at me and smile like that sentence was enough to make everything right in the world. We drove home late that night, the city lights fading in the rearview mirror. Ryan sat quietly beside me, holding the award plaque in his lap. Halfway home, he said softly, "Dad, yeah, I'm thinking about writing more, maybe even majoring in English. You think that's crazy?" I smiled. "Not at all. I think it's exactly what you're meant to do." He looked at me, then nodded. "Mom used to say stories keep people alive. Maybe that's why I write, so she never really leaves." I glanced at him, the streetlights flickering across his face. "You got her heart, son, and maybe her gift too." He grinned. "Guess I got a little of yours too, the stubborn part." We both laughed, and for a while, the road ahead felt lighter than it had in years. When we got home, I placed the award on the mantel next to Ellen's photo. For a moment I stood there, hand on the frame, whispering, "He did it, Ellen. He really did it." And in that quiet house, filled with echoes of laughter and love and forgiveness, I could almost swear I felt her there, proud, at peace, smiling. Summer came quietly that year. The kind of summer where the days stretch long and golden, and every evening smells like cut grass and barbecue smoke drifting through the neighborhood. Ryan's graduation cap sat on the mantel beside Ellen's picture, and every time I walked past it, I felt that familiar pinch of pride and ache all tangled together. He'd done it, against everything life threw at us. The loss, the distance, the misunderstandings. He'd made it through. Now he was packing for college. Boxes filled his room, half labeled and scattered across the floor. Posters rolled up, books stacked in neat piles, shirts folded with that careless precision only a teenager can manage. I stood by the door, watching him stuff a pair of sneakers into a suitcase. "You sure you've got everything?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, not looking up. "Pretty much." There was a pause, one of those awkward ones where you both know you're trying to avoid what really needs to be said. I stepped inside, picked up a frame from his desk. It was the photo of the three of us from when he was maybe 6. Ellen holding him, me standing behind with my arms around them both. His smile back then had no edges, no shadows, just light. "You know," I said quietly, "I never thought I'd see you grow up this fast." He glanced up, grinning. "You make it sound like I'm 80. I chuckled. "Feels like it sometimes." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept walking past his room, hearing the faint shuffle of him moving things, the zipper of his backpack, the murmur of music from his phone. It hit me then. This house was about to get quiet again. Too quiet. When Ellen passed, I thought I'd already lived through the hardest kind of silence. But this felt different. This was the kind of silence that comes when someone's not gone, but they're no longer yours to keep. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the coffee mug I'd been using since before Ryan was born. It had a crack down the side. Ellen used to joke that I'd never let it go because it matched me, a little broken, but still holding together. She wasn't wrong. The next morning, I helped him load the car. His old red pickup, the one we rebuilt together in the garage, was packed full. I could barely see out the back window for all the boxes. "You sure you don't want me to drive with you?" I asked. He shook his head. "It's only 2 hours away, Dad. I'll be fine." I nodded, forcing a smile. "I know. Just be careful, all right? I will." He stood there for a moment, fidgeting with his keys. Then he looked at me, really looked at me. "I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you," he said. That hit me harder than I expected. I tried to make it light. "Well, I did give you the car." He laughed, but his eyes softened. "Not just the car, Dad. Everything. You never gave up on me. Even when I made it hard." I swallowed hard. "That's what dads are for." He stepped forward then, hugged me tight, not the half-hearted, teenage kind of hug, but one that said everything words couldn't. For a second, I felt Ellen there too, like the three of us were holding on in spirit, the way we used to. Then, as quickly as it came, it was time to let go. I watched from the porch as he pulled out of the driveway. He honked twice, like he used to when he was a kid pretending to drive my old truck. And then, he was gone. The gravel settled, the sound faded, and the house exhaled its silence again. That first week without him was strange. I'd still make 2 cups of coffee in the morning by habit, still knock on his door before realizing no one was inside, still glance at the clock around 4 p.m., waiting for the sound of the front door and his, "Hey, Dad," that wouldn't come. So I threw myself into fixing things. The gutters, the fence, even the old radio Ellen loved. It was easier than sitting in the quiet. Then one day, I went to clean his room properly, dust, vacuum, maybe pack away some old stuff he'd left behind. That's when I noticed the drawer. The same drawer. The one I'd found his essay in. I almost didn't open it. I told myself it was just filled with old school notes or random junk. But curiosity has a way of whispering at a man's heart until he listens. I pulled the handle gently. Inside, beneath a few notebooks, was an envelope. My name was written on the front in Ryan's handwriting. I sat on the edge of his bed, heart pounding. For a long moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it. Then, finally, I did. Inside was a folded piece of paper, and something small wrapped in tissue. I unfolded the letter first. "Dad, if you're reading this, it means I'm probably already on the road or moved into my dorm. I didn't know how to say everything I wanted before I left, so I'm writing it here. When Mom died, I blamed you. I thought you didn't care because you didn't cry like I did. I thought you just wanted to move on. I was wrong. I see now that you were trying to keep me standing, even when you were falling apart yourself. You taught me what strength looks like. You taught me love isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and patient. The kind that stays even when it hurts. Mom used to say I'd understand you one day. I think that day finally came. Thank you for being my dad, not the perfect one, but the one who never gave up. I love you. Ryan, I sat there for a long time, unable to move. Tears came slow, then faster. I wasn't even sure what I was crying for. Pride, love, grief, maybe all of it tangled together. Then I opened the tissue. Inside was a small silver keychain, the one from the old truck we built together. On the back, engraved in tiny letters, were the words, "For the man who stayed." That was the moment it hit me. Everything I doubted, every question I'd asked myself about whether I'd been enough, it didn't matter anymore. Because he saw me, really saw me, and in that quiet room, holding his letter and that little silver keychain, I whispered, "Thank you, son." The house didn't feel empty anymore after that. It felt full of love, memory, and everything unspoken between us that no silence could erase. It was early December when Ryan called. I remember because the first snow had just begun to fall, soft flakes gathering on the porch railing, quiet as ash. I was fixing a loose cabinet door when the phone rang. His voice came through the line bright and alive, like a rush of summer cutting through winter air. "Hey, Dad," he said. "Mind if I come home this weekend?" I tried to play it cool, but I could feel a smile creeping across my face. "Home's always open, son. You don't need to ask." He laughed softly. "Yeah, I know. I just thought maybe we could talk, catch up." "Sounds good," I said. "Drive safe." And after we hung up, I stood there a long while, just listening to the hum of the empty house. For the first time in months, it felt like something was coming alive again, like warmth was on its way back. When Friday came, I cleaned the place top to bottom. Ellen would have laughed at me, fussing with curtains and re-polishing furniture no one but me ever looked at. But I couldn't help it. I wanted the house to feel like home again, like it used to when the smell of her cooking filled every corner and Ryan's laughter ran up the stairs. By the time his truck pulled up, I was already standing at the window. He stepped out, taller, older somehow, though only a few months had passed. There was a confidence in his stride now, a steadiness I hadn't seen before. When he walked through the door, I didn't hesitate. I just pulled him into a hug. He hugged me back, tight and unashamed. "Good to see you, Dad. You too, kiddo." He grinned. "You still call me that?" "I probably always will." Dinner that night was simple: steak, mashed potatoes, and Ellen's cornbread recipe I could never quite get right. Ryan didn't seem to mind. He ate like he'd been starving. "So," I said between bites, "how's college life treating you?" He leaned back smiling. "Busy. A little crazy. But good. Really good. That's what I like to hear." He hesitated for a moment, then added, "I took that photo you framed. The one of you, me, and Mom. I put it on my desk." I froze mid-bite. "You did?" "Yeah. Some of my friends noticed it and asked who you guys were." I told them everything. About Mom, about you. About how you kept us going. There was no bitterness in his tone. No walls. Just truth. I nodded slowly. "She'd be proud of you, Ryan." He smiled, his eyes softening. "You think so?" "I know so." Later that night, after the dishes were washed and the fire died down, Ryan and I sat in the living room with 2 mugs of cocoa. His idea. He used to hate cocoa. Said it was for kids. Now he said it reminded him of her. "Dad," he said quietly, "I've been thinking a lot about Mom lately." I nodded. "I figured. I used to think if you'd just tried harder, she might have stayed. That maybe you gave up too soon." My chest tightened. His words weren't cruel. They were careful, almost fragile. "I know," I said softly. "You weren't wrong to feel that way." He looked at me then, eyes reflecting the flicker of the fire. "But now that I've seen how hard relationships can be, how people drift, how love changes, I get it. I really do." He sighed. "You didn't stop loving her. You just couldn't save her. And I'm sorry for not seeing that sooner." I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath. "Ryan," I said, voice catching, "you don't owe me an apology." "Maybe not," he said, "but I needed to say it." The room went quiet, filled with that tender silence that only forgiveness can bring. The next morning I woke up early, the smell of coffee already in the air. Ryan was in the kitchen, flipping pancakes with the same clumsy grace Ellen used to have. "Morning, chef," I said. He turned, grinning. "Figured I'd give you a break. Don't get used to it." I laughed, sitting at the table. "You're full of surprises." He poured syrup over 2 plates and sat across from me. "Hey, Dad," he said between bites. "Do you ever feel like Mom's still around? Like she's watching us?" I looked out the window. The light coming through the frost made the air shimmer. "All the time," I said. "Sometimes when the wind blows through the trees, I swear I hear her humming. You remember how she used to do that while cooking?" He nodded, smiling faintly. "Yeah, I do. She's here," I said quietly, just in a different way. That afternoon, we went to visit Ellen's grave. Ryan carried a small bouquet of lilies, her favorite. The cemetery was quiet, the sky pale and still. He knelt beside her headstone, brushed away a few fallen leaves, and set the flowers down. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "Hey, Mom, it's me." His voice trembled, but he didn't hide it. "I miss you. Every day. But I think I finally understand Dad now. You were right. He's stronger than I gave him credit for." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my own voice steady. "She'd be so proud of you, Ryan." He looked up at me then and smiled. Not the smile of a boy trying to be brave, but of a man at peace with where he came from. That night, after we came home, Ryan sat on the porch while I turned off the lights inside. The air was cold, the stars sharp and clear. I joined him, handing him a blanket. He didn't say much at first, just looked out at the yard where the wind moved through the trees like a whisper. Finally, he said, "Dade, do you ever think about what she'd say if she saw us now?" I smiled faintly. "She'd probably say, 'About time you two stopped being so stubborn.'" He laughed. "Yeah, probably." Then he added, quieter, "Thanks for not giving up on me." I looked at him, really looked. The boy I'd raised was gone, replaced by a man who'd walked through pain and come out stronger. "You never gave up on me either," I said. When he left the next morning, I didn't feel that same hollow ache I did before, because this time it wasn't a goodbye. It was a beginning, a promise that no distance could undo what we'd rebuilt. As his truck disappeared down the road, I stood on the porch and whispered, "Drive safe, son." The words drifted into the cold air. And for the first time in a long while, I swore I heard Ellen's voice echo back, soft and warm, "He will." The house felt lighter after Ryan's visit, as if something invisible had been lifted. I found myself humming again while fixing things, even cooking full meals instead of heating up leftovers. Every few days Ryan would call. Not long conversations, but enough. "Hey, Dad, how's the truck holding up?" Or, "I found a diner that makes pie almost as good as Mom's." He always sounded happy, and that was enough for me. Then one Sunday morning, I got a message from him that read, "Don't plan anything for next weekend. I'm coming home, and I've got a surprise." I couldn't help but smile. Ryan had never been one for surprises, at least not the good kind. That next Friday, the sound of his truck coming up the drive pulled me straight to the window. When I saw what he was towing behind it, I had to blink twice. It was a small trailer, old, dented, but freshly painted a pale blue. He climbed out, wearing a grin that could light up the sky. "What on earth is this?" I asked, walking out to meet him. "Project," he said. "Been working on it since Thanksgiving." I crossed my arms, pretending to scold him. "You've got that look your mother used to have when she knew she was about to get away with something." He laughed. Maybe she's rubbing off on me. Inside the trailer was a mess of tools, boards, metal scraps, and something covered under a tarp. I lifted a corner of it and caught the faint smell of sawdust and varnish. "You building a boat?" I asked. "Not quite," he winked. "You'll see." He spent most of that weekend in the garage, door closed, radio humming softly through the walls. Every now and then I'd peek in, but he'd wave me off with a grin. "Patience, old man," he'd say. "You taught me that, remember? Don't quote me when it's inconvenient." I shot back, and he laughed. By Sunday evening, he came knocking on my door. "All right," he said, "come with me." He led me to the backyard, where he dragged the trailer around. The tarp was gone. What sat in its place made me freeze. It was a bench, hand carved from dark oak, polished and gleaming under the setting sun. On the backrest, carved into the wood, were 3 names: Ellen. "Ryan, Dad, and beneath them, a small inscription burned into the grain, "Where Love Waits." I didn't say anything for a long time. My throat was too tight for words. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck, a little nervous now. "I wanted to build it for her. I thought maybe you could put it by the garden. You know, where she used to plant those roses." I turned to him, eyes stinging. "You made this yourself?" He nodded. "Yeah, took a while. But I wanted it to be right." We carried the bench to the garden together. The air smelled like earth and pine, and the last bit of sunlight stretched across the yard. When we set it down, it looked as if it had always belonged there. I sat first, running my hand along the smooth surface. It was solid, steady, built with care, built with love. Ryan sat beside me. For a while we didn't speak. We just sat there watching the sun dip behind the trees. Then I said, quietly, "Your mom would have loved this." He smiled. "Yeah, I was thinking the same thing." The wind moved through the leaves, gentle and soft. For a brief second it felt like she was right there, sitting between us, humming the way she used to. Later that night, as Ryan packed up to leave, I walked him to his truck. "You've done good, son," I said. "Better than good." He shrugged modestly. "Wes, I learned from the best." Before he climbed in, he hesitated. "Hey, Dad, I've been thinking. Maybe next semester you could come up for a weekend. Meet some of my friends. See the town." I blinked. "You sure you want your old man crashing your college life?" He smiled. "You're not crashing anything. I want you there." That simple sentence, "I want you there," meant more than he probably knew. After he drove off, I went back to the bench and sat alone for a while. The moon was out, silver and soft, lighting up the garden. I thought about all the times I'd worried Ryan didn't care, all the nights I'd doubted whether I'd been enough for him. And here I was, sitting on proof that love had been there all along. Sometimes love doesn't shout. Sometimes it builds something with its hands and leaves it where your heart will find it. In the weeks that followed, I visited that bench every evening. Some nights I'd bring a cup of coffee, others I'd just sit and listen to the wind. It became a ritual, a quiet conversation between the past and the present. Neighbors started noticing. A few even stopped by, saying how beautiful the bench was. I'd smile and say, "My son built it." And every time I said it, my chest swelled with something I hadn't felt in years, pride without ache. One night, while sitting there under the stars, I whispered, "You were right, Ellen. He's just like you, stubborn, tender, and full of heart." The leaves rustled softly in reply, and I smiled. Maybe that was her way of saying she knew. It happened on a Thursday night in March. The day had started out calm, a light drizzle, a whisper of wind through the trees. But by evening, the sky had turned dark and mean, the kind of gray that feels heavy in your chest. I remember standing at the window, watching the branches sway and the rain whip sideways across the yard. The news anchor on TV said it was the worst storm we'd had in a decade. Tornado warnings, flash flood alerts. I wasn't worried about the house. It had weathered worse. But I was worried about the bench. That bench wasn't just wood and screws. It was love, carved by my son's hands, a symbol of everything we'd built back together. So when the wind began howling, I found myself slipping on my coat and boots like a fool and heading outside. The rain hit hard, sharp as needles against my face. Lightning flashed, splitting the sky, followed by thunder that shook the porch steps. The bench stood at the far end of the garden, half hidden by the rose bushes that had yet to bloom. I could barely see it through the sheets of rain, but I could hear the creak of wood shifting in the wind. "Come on, old man," I muttered to myself. "You're too old for this." Still, I trudged through the mud, boots sinking deep. When I reached the bench, it was trembling under the force of the storm, one of the legs already half buried in wet soil. I crouched beside it, gripping the backrest. "Hold on," I said aloud, though maybe I wasn't talking to the bench at all. For a moment I saw it all again. Ryan in the driveway, his hands covered in sawdust, grinning like a boy showing off his first masterpiece. I couldn't let that piece of him be taken. By the time I dragged it under the porch cover, I was soaked to the bone. The lights flickered, then went out completely. The only sound was the storm, wild, merciless, alive. I sat there beside the bench, dripping wet, catching my breath. "Still here?" I whispered, patting the wood. "We're both still here?" In the darkness, thunder cracked again, and I thought about how strange it was. How something as simple as a piece of furniture could carry so much of a person's heart. It wasn't just the bench. It was every word he hadn't said, every apology we'd both left hanging in the air for years, every quiet, patient act of love that had built its way into something solid. The next morning, the storm had passed. The air smelled fresh and sharp, like the world had been scrubbed clean. Branches littered the lawn, puddles shimmered across the driveway, but the house had held. I dragged the bench back to the garden. Mud streaked the legs, but it was fine, sturdy, still beautiful. The inscription, "Where Love Waits," caught the sunlight just right. I sat down on it, let the warmth of morning seep into my bones. That's when the phone rang. It was Ryan. "Dade, you okay?" His voice was tight, urgent. "Fine," I said, smiling despite myself. "A little wet, maybe. I saw the storm warnings and tried calling last night, but the lines were down. I was worried. You and half the county, I bet." He laughed, the sound shaky but real. "You sure everything's okay?" "House still standing." "Still standing," I said. "And the bench survived too." There was a pause, the kind that carries more than silence. "You went out there, didn't you?" he asked softly. I chuckled. "You know me too well." "Daddy sighed." "You could have gotten hurt." "I couldn't let it go, Ryan. You built that with your heart. Some things you protect, no matter the storm." For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then, quietly, he said, "I love you." "Dad," I swallowed hard. "I know, son. I love you too." After that call, I sat there for a while, watching the sky slowly clear. It hit me, how much had changed between us. There was a time when every word we spoke was sharp, cautious, full of blame or fear. Now, even silence between us felt safe. That's what healing does. It doesn't erase the past. It teaches you how to hold it gently. That weekend, Ryan came home again. He pulled up in his truck, looked around the yard, and let out a low whistle. "Storm didn't stand a chance, huh?" "Not against this place," I said proudly. He walked over to the bench, ran his hand over the wood, and smiled. "You kept it safe." "Of course." He turned to me, eyes glinting. "Guess I get that from you." I laughed. "What, the stubbornness?" "The loyalty," he said softly. We spent the rest of the day repairing the fence, cutting fallen branches, fixing a few loose shingles. It felt good, working side by side, not out of duty, but out of rhythm. At one point, Ryan paused, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and said, "You ever notice how storms make everything look clearer afterward?" I looked up at the bright sky. "Yeah, maybe they wash away what doesn't matter." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe that's what we needed too." That night we sat on the bench again. The air was calm now, the world clean and quiet. Ryan leaned back, hands folded behind his head. "You know, Dad, when I built this, I didn't realize it'd become our place." I smiled. "Neither did I. But I think your mom knew." He chuckled softly. "You really think she's out here, watching?" "I don't just think," I said, looking at the stars. "I feel it, right here." I pressed my hand to my chest. He nodded, and for a long time we didn't speak. We didn't need to. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the faintest hum, a tune I hadn't heard in years, familiar as breath. Ellen's lullaby. Ryan turned to me, eyes wide. "Did you?" I smiled. "Yeah, I heard it too." But the storm had taken so much from the world that night. Power lines, trees, fences. But somehow it had given something back to us. It reminded us that love, real love, isn't about never breaking. It's about holding on through the wind and still standing together when it passes. It's been 5 years since that stormy night. The house is quieter now. The hum of life has slowed to something gentler. Birdsong at dawn. The creak of old floorboards, the whisper of wind through the pines. I still live in the same place. Same yard, same front porch. But the world feels different now. Not because it's changed, but because I have. Ryan visits every Sunday with his wife, Emily, and their little boy, my grandson, Henry. He's got his father's curious eyes and his mother's laugh. Every time he runs through that yard, I see flashes of the boy Ryan used to be. Knees scraped, face lit with wonder, always asking why. It's strange, isn't it? You spend half your life trying to teach your children lessons. Then one day, they come back to teach you the ones you missed. One Sunday afternoon, I was sitting on the bench in the garden. That bench. The same one Ryan built, the same one that weathered every storm, the same one that had become a piece of our story. Henry climbed up beside me, clutching a toy car in one hand. Grandpa, he said, Daddy said you built this house all by yourself. I chuckled. Not all by myself, kiddo. I had help from your grandma, and later, from your dad. Did my daddy help with this bench too? I looked at the wood, tracing my fingers over the inscription. Where love waits. Yeah, I said softly. He built it for me. When we weren't so good at saying things out loud, Henry tilted his head, confused. Like what? Like I'm sorry. Or I love you. Or I understand. He smiled, missing a front tooth. You say those all the time now. I laughed. Yeah, I guess I learned. Ryan came out then, carrying a tray of lemonade. Emily followed, balancing a bowl of fruit. Dad, Ryan said, nodding at the bench. Still your favorite spot? Always will be. He smiled, set the tray down, and sat beside me. Henry climbed into his lap. It was a simple moment. Nothing grand, nothing cinematic. But it hit me harder than any storm ever had. Because this was the picture of everything I'd once thought I'd lost. Family, forgiveness, home. As we sat there, Ryan glanced toward the old oak tree in the corner of the yard. The one that had been struck by lightning years ago. You ever gonna cut that thing down? He asked. No, I said. It's still got life in it. Might look scarred, but it's still standing. He smirked. You're talking about the tree or yourself? I grinned. Maybe both. Later that evening, after they'd gone, I sat out there alone again. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds. I leaned back against the bench, closed my eyes, and just listened. The world was full of sounds. Crickets, distant laughter, the rustle of leaves. But somewhere in all that, I could still hear Ellen's voice. Not words, just that feeling. That warmth. That quiet assurance that I'd finally done something right. For so long, I'd carried guilt like a stone in my chest. For leaving her, for failing Ryan, for not being enough of a father, a husband, a man. But guilt has a way of fading when love stays long enough to teach you grace. When Ryan was younger, he used to say he'd never understand why I left his mother. Now, as a husband himself, he finally does. He once told me, Dad, love isn't just about staying. It's about knowing when to fight, and when to walk away so both people can breathe. That line stayed with me. Because that's what I'd tried to do all those years ago, and hearing him say it, not with anger but with compassion, was like being forgiven twice. A few months back, Ryan surprised me with a gift. He handed me a small wooden box, hand-carved, smooth, polished. When I opened it, there was a folded piece of paper inside. I unfolded it and found a note written in Ryan's handwriting. Dad, this is made from the leftover wood from the bench. Inside is space for 3 things. 1 for Mom, 1 for me, and 1 for you. I thought we could each leave something small here. Not to remember what we lost, but to honor what we found. I stared at that note for a long time. Then, I reached into my wallet and pulled out the old photograph of Ellen holding baby Ryan. The one I'd kept since the day he was born. That went in first. Ryan added a tiny toy car Henry had outgrown. And for the 3rd space, mine, I slipped in a small, folded scrap of paper. It was a line from the last letter I'd ever written to Ellen. One I'd never had the courage to send. Maybe one day, our boy will understand the love that tore us apart. And now, he finally had. A few weeks ago, Henry found that box again. He brought it to me, curious as ever. Grandpa, what's this? I told him. It's a box full of love stories. He smiled, running his tiny fingers along the carvings. Can I add one someday? Of course, I said. That's what it's for. So that's what legacy looks like, I suppose. It's not about money or houses or family heirlooms. It's about the things we build, not with our hands, but with our hearts. The words we say after too long of being silent. The forgiveness we learn to give, and the love we learn to keep. That's what my son taught me. And every time I sit on that old wooden bench, with its cracks and carvings and memories, I realize something simple but true. We spend half our lives waiting for love to come back, when, in truth, it never really left. It was just waiting, quietly, right where love always waits.